Okay, this is the first part of the video tutorial for lesson 10.1, which is going to look at solving linear inequalities. And there's a few different types, so we're just going to go through them. So just remember the different ways we can write these. So this symbol here, as it points to the left, notice that begins with an L, as does left. So this would be less than, and this would be greater than. If we have the line underneath, that means that we're allowed to have answers that are equal to this number as well. And when we're solving, I'm going to solve linear equations first, and then we'll show you how that applies to inequalities. So things like distributive rule, 3 times x, 3 times 2. Bring all your x's to one side by doing opposites. So positive x, the opposite would be negative x. 3x take away x is 2x. Of course, the reason we do opposites is these cancel now, so we just get left with positive 10 or just 10. Then do the numbers to the other side. So instead of adding 6, subtract 6 from both sides. 10 take away 6 is 4. And obviously 6 take away 6 is 0. It cancels out. That's why we do the opposite. And then instead of timesing by 2, you can divide by 2. So we did that when we did linear equations originally. Just remember also, you can actually type questions if you are solving linear equalities. Linear equations. You can just type them into Desmos as well, which is actually easier. So that question that we just did, notice once you type it in here, it says look for the x-intercept. There you go. You can see the answer was 2, which is obviously much quicker than what we actually just did. And we're going to do a similar thing when we come to doing linear inequalities as well. So if we are doing them by hand, basically it's the same idea. Whatever you do to one side of the equation, you must do to the other side of the equation. So by replacing the equals with greater than, all that happened is the final answer just turned out to be x is greater than 2. Now look what happens as I actually type that into Desmos. And this time something slightly different is going to happen. X plus 10. So notice it still goes through the 2, but there's a couple of extra things that happened here. One is instead of having a solid line here, we have a dotted line here. Now, there are certain questions that will have a solid line, but for questions that are greater than or less than, they will actually draw a dotted line for you. And notice the right of the picture is actually shaded for this one. Now, the reason the picture right of this is shaded is, as we've said, all the answers are greater than 2. Obviously, answers like 4, 6, 8, and 10. Clearly, they're all greater than 2. So basically, any number to this side of this line would be a solution, and that's why we have the shading for these types of questions. Now, just to show you a few other ones which I'd already pre-typed in. So the same question, but this time I just put less than. Notice this time it shades to the left of the line. So the direction that the arrow points for this question is going to dictate which way that the shading points. Now, sometimes though, the question actually flips over. So it's always a good idea to check in Desmos just to make sure. Sometimes when the question says less than, it will actually be shaded to the right. So it's always a good idea just to use Desmos just to make sure your answer is good. Now for this one, same question, but notice I put the equal sign here. So I'm still shading to the right because it's pointing to the right. But also notice this time though, I have that solid line. So inequalities that have the equal sign there, you're also going to notice this is a solid line. And then there's a little summary here just to say what all those things are, which side is shaded, and also whether you get a dotted line or a solid line. Now, the exception to the question is, and I switched this just a little bit, instead of making it x plus 10, I put 5x plus 10. So distribute, take away 5x from both sides, so I get negative 2x, subtract 6 from both sides. The key rule for inequalities, if you're doing them by hand, is if you multiply or divide by a negative number, the inequality flips over. So for this question, as it's negative 2x, when I divide by negative 2, the greater than turns into actually a less than. So that's why you want to type these into Desmos, because just by looking at this question, I don't think it's obvious that the greater than is going to flip and turn into a less than, because it looks so similar to the other question. So certainly use Desmos when you're doing this type of question. Now, one of the questions they recommended that you practice for the SOL is a question like this. And one thing they've done here straight away is they haven't put X, they put Y. And sometimes they ask us to draw on a number line what the solution is as well. So we're going to look at those two things together. So I'm going to type in the question. Let me go to slide 11. And as I've typed it in here, it will draw it for you. But actually, instead of drawing the vertical line that we had before, it draws the horizontal line. So I would definitely recommend that you change this to X. If necessary, zoom in and zoom out so you can see the answer better. This one seems to be okay. So you can see the answer is negative 6, and you can clearly see it's to the left of negative 6. So if I was typing in the answer here, it would be x is less than or equal to -6. Now, as I type that in, I press the less than and I press the equals, and it drew that symbol for me. In Desmos, you have all those 4 symbols down here if you need to enter them as well. And notice, actually, as I switch this picture off, hopefully you can see that these two things are the same. So that's another good way of checking your answer. If you have a question and you think you know what the answer is, type it in and just make sure it's the same thing. Definitely making sure that if it's a solid line, the original one's solid as well. Or if it was dotted, then the original one's dotted as well. Now, as we come to draw it on the number line, though, now we know that the answer is, well, we had x as less than -6, but we know this question is really y. As we have y is less than -6 or equal to -6, this is where we have to decide how we draw a closed circle or a solid circle or an open circle. So for this one, this is going to be a closed circle. When I have the equal sign, it's a closed circle. As the answer is less than, I'm going to go to the left. If it was just y is less than -6, it would basically be the same picture, but it would be an open circle. So notice though, although the original question pointed to the right, the correct answer actually points to the left, and that's why you want to use your Desmos just to check that. And there's a summary of the open circle or the closed circle, reminding you to check for the equal sign because that will mainly make that decision for you. And then there's a few questions you can go ahead and try on your Desmos calculator just to make sure that you can do them. Notice that these are actually fractions. So when you use Desmos, you'll actually get decimals. So you might just have to check exactly which decimal is the same. Sometimes it won't give you the exact fraction. So if you're not sure, just type in each decimal individually, like -4 divided by 7, see if it gives you the same answer. -7 divided by 4, see if it gives you the same answer, and so on. Let's move on to the next question. Oops. And there is a Desmos calculator provided for you there, so you can actually go ahead and try these as well. And then the same thing for this one as well. Mainly just focusing on, is it to the left or to the right? And which decimal gives you the same answer as this one? If I remember correctly for this one specifically, I think it says 1.333. And that's the one where if you type in 1.333, it will actually give you the incorrect fraction. So what we're going to notice is, oh, look, these threes repeat. So keep typing threes. It will disappear, but then keep going, keep typing threes, and then eventually it will come back to you, and you can tell that it's 4/3, which I think was one of the answer choices. There you go. So it's probably between A and B. Type it in just to make sure which side is shaded so you can figure that out. From these questions here, same thing. You're just going to type it into Desmos, and you're going to look to see which answer is actually given to you. We should be able to narrow this one down straight away because there's no equal sign here. So I know that it's not the ones with the closed circles. So I already know it's between A and B. I know the answer is 4. I just need to know, is it to the left or is it to the right? And you can use your calculator to find that out. And same for number 4. This one is probably one that's slightly more complicated. They've given us the answer and they've given us 4 possible ones. So you might just have to go through one at a time. Type in this question and then check, does it give you the answer x is greater than or equal to 2? If it does, then you should be fine. If you want to, you can check B, C, and D just to make sure that none of the others are correct. But once you found the right answer, that should give you the correct choice. So word problems. Some of the words that they use for these when we see them, is greater than refers to the greater than symbol, is less than refers to the less than symbol. And the reason I'm emphasizing the is here, in the previous units, or the first unit, in fact, when we saw less than, that actually meant subtract. When you see is less than, then that actually means the inequality. So that word is very important. I always like to remember that the inequality starts with an I as well. So when you see is, I'm thinking about that inequality, and it's something we just got to be a little bit careful of. We might see the word under, or we might see the word over, depending on which one of these we do as well. And a couple of important ones at the end here. At least means greater than or equal to, and at most means less than or equal to. So when you say you've got to be at least 18 to vote, that means you could be 18 or more, and that's why you'd be greater than or equal to. Obviously, if you are 18, you are allowed to vote for this. So keep an eye out for those, and also minimum and maximum as well. If the minimum value is, that's the lowest you can have. So in other words, you'd have to have something higher than that. And same for maximum as well. So we've got 3 questions we can try here. We've got our little sketch pad where we can fill in the answers to. So you have a $50 bill to go to the cinema. So I know $50 is important. You want to buy a box of popcorn for $6.99, and each film costs $10.99. How many films could you afford to see? So you're buying 1 box of popcorn straight away, which is $6.99. So this is not going to be too neat. I apologize. Each film, so this is going to be an additional cost. So I know I'm going to be adding here, and each film costs $10.99. And this is the one that could change because it depends how many films I go to. If I go to one film, it'll just be $10.99. If I go to two films, it'll be 2 times $10.99, and so on. So I need to put the F here. How many films could you afford to see? Well, if I got $50, this total here, it better be less than $50, or it could equal $50. Otherwise, I'm going to be in trouble and I'm not going to have enough money. So that's how I set out my inequality. It says we can use the Desmos calculator on the next one. So let's do that. $6.99 plus $10.99. Now, if I put F, it's just going to say error in a minute, but we'll run with that just for now. So it gives you the warning, and then you just got to remember to change the variable back to an X. And then you can see the answer here. So 3.914. Now, normally you'd round that up to 4, but notice 4 is not in the shaded region for this question. So actually for this one, we got to round down. We can't quite afford 4 films. It's got to be less than this number. So the nearest whole number to this then will therefore be 3. So there's your answer. You could go and see 3 films. If you were to check on this, if you think you could do 4 films, that would be 4 times 10.99. And then you've got to pay for your popcorn as well on top, which is $6.99. And you can see it's just a little bit too expensive, $50.95. As we don't have that, that tells us also that we can't have 4 films for this one. Next one, car salesman receives a weekly salary of $275 and $175 for each car they sell. So they get $275 straight away, no matter what. And then they get $175 for each car they sell. So this is the variable. If they sell 1 car, they get 175. If they sell 2, they get 2 times 175, and so on. How many cars must they sell each week to earn at least 1,500? So at least, although it kind of sounds like less than, is actually not. It's actually the exact opposite of that one. At least means 1,500 or more. So I actually need the greater than for this question. And fill in my 1,500 here. And then same thing. I can go to the next one and I can type this in. So 275 plus 175C, and I want it to be greater than or equal to, oops, pressing something wrong here, there we go, 2,500. And once again, it reminds me, don't put the C, put the X. And it might be we need to zoom out on this one to actually see where it is. So let me just quickly move my picture out of the way. There we go, now we can see it better. I actually think I typed that in wrong because I don't remember that answer. It's 1,500. Whoops. So just make sure you are typing it incorrectly from one screen to another. There we go. That's better. And this one's perfectly good. This one says 7. The inequality does say equal to, so I am allowed 7 for this one. If this one had strictly been greater than, I would not have been allowed the 7 for this question. So you always have to check that inequality to see, are you allowed, is it equal to that value or not? Last one, Mr. Bowles is planning an awards dinner. The venue charges $250 fee and $20 for each person. He can spend at most $1,000. How many people can he have at the awards ceremony? So the fixed thing is $250. So very similar to the previous questions here, because we're only looking with one variable right now. $20 for each person. So that's my variable. That each one is kind of the clue. I'm going to use P for people for this one. He can spend at most $1,000. So he can't spend any more than that. So this is not more than. This is actually less than or equal to. He can spend the $1,000, or he can spend less than $1,000 because that's all the money he has. And then as we go on to the next one, oops, I would actually have to go back to this one here. So it was 250 plus 20. I'm just going to go ahead and put the X in straight away this time. I will use the inequality from here this time as well. Is 1,000, and I think we can just click on it straight away. 37.5. So normally you'd round that to 38, but 38 would not actually be one of the answers to this question. So I'm just zooming out a little bit just so you can see a little bit better. But yeah, you can see here, 38 is not included in the shaded region. So you would actually have to go down to the previous number, which would be 37. So inequalities can be a little sneaky with things like that. Your normal rules for rounding might not actually apply. And that's the first part of the lesson. There is a second video which will remind you how to do this with 2 variables as well.